Hey guys, how's it going? It's Ellis. So it's 2018, and coming up here on June 14th, we're going to have the US Open over at Shinnecock Hills Golf Course. So I figured I'd do a quick video today just on the brief history of the US Open, kind of maybe some fun facts and what really makes this tournament that important and why it's such a major point in the sport of golf. So a lot to go through, so let's get started. So the first US Open was held in 1895. It's about 123 years ago from the recording of this video. It was held at Newport Country Club in Rhode Island. The original winner was Horace Rawlings. He was English, and he actually only won $150 in cash, a gold medal valued at about $50, and the current US Open trophy. Actually, kind of this one we use today. Kind of. But we'll kind of look at that a little bit later. So it was played over 36 holes. But it was only a 9-hole course, so they had to play the course 4 times in order to get through it, and it was played in one day. And there were actually only 11 players. So there weren't that many golf professionals around at the time. Golf wasn't as huge of a sport as it is today, and obviously back in 1895, professional athlete wasn't the main profession. So having the best 11 players, especially ones that, came over in a boat from Europe, was a really big deal. So going to that, the US Open was actually dominated by British players until 1911 when we had our first American winner, John McDermott. He actually won twice in 1911 and 1912. And from that point, from 1911 onward, the US Open has primarily been won by American players. The most notable after him was actually Francis Ouimet, who won in 1913 by amazing odds, beating the professionals Harry Vardon and Ted Ray that came over from England specifically to win the US Open at the time. Vardon actually won the trophy in 1900 and actually has 5 British Opens coming to that point. So he was the best golfer of the time, and to this day is regarded as one of the best English professional golfers that has ever been. So now moving on to the actual US Open trophy. It was first given in 1895 to Rawlings, who was the original winner, and it was made by the Gorham Company, who was famous for their silver at the time. The trophy is engraved immediately after the tournament, and the winner actually gets to watch as it happens, which is pretty cool. But the trophy is so valuable with so much silver because of the size. In 1898, the winner at the time, Fred Hurd, actually had to put a deposit on the trophy when he won it because he was known as a heavy drinker and they were actually afraid he would sell it for drinking money. Though that trophy was actually destroyed in 1946 in a fire at a clubhouse where it was being held at the home course of the current winner at the time. But we did get a new trophy that's almost an exact replica of that one from 1947 to the present. The winner of the US Open gets to take that trophy home, but has to return at the end of that year when the next US Open happens. So the trophy that you see them hold up is the same trophy that we've seen since 1947 all the way to now, and has sat in the living rooms of some of the best players in the world. Has been carried in trophy cases and traveled around the world. It's all the same one. And actually the winners and the host golf clubs that hold the US Open actually can buy a trophy, but only get one. If you lose it or you break it, you can't buy a second one. And not sure why, but the trophy that you can purchase is actually only 90% scale replica of the actual US Open trophy. So now actually talking about a lot of the biggest names and some of the biggest influences that have won the US Open, we can't start that list without mentioning Bobby Jones, who, like Francis Ouimet, actually stayed an amateur for his entire career. Although he stayed an amateur, he actually managed to win the US Open 4 times, in 1923, 26, 29, and 30. He was the first person to actually win the US Open and British Opens both in the same year, and was the first person to win the pre-Masters Grand Slam, which at the time consisted of the Amateur Championship at St. Andrews, the Open Championship, the US Open, and the US Amateur. Though after that time, golf kind of took a little bit of a lull, because the US Open, after that, was actually canceled in 1917 to 1918 due to World War I, It was also canceled in 1942 through 1945 in World War II. With the cancellation of the tournament because of World War II, actually in its place was something known as the Hail America Open, which still attracted some of the biggest names in golf, which brings us to our next huge contender in the US Open, which was Ben Hogan, who actually won 4 official US Opens, and some consider his Hail America Open win in the 1942 tournament to actually be considered his 5th, but on record, it's still 4th. So that moves us to the 3 modern greats of the game, who are actually known for dominating all 4 majors up and during their time. Where Arnold Palmer, who had 1 US Open win in 1960, Jack Nicklaus, who had 4 wins from 62 to 1980, and Gary Player, who also only had 1 win in 65. Obviously, Jack Nicklaus taking the biggest portion of the US Open wins out of all of them, which obviously him totaling up to 18 majors doesn't surprise anybody. So now going to the courses the US Open is actually played on. In the modern day, they're typically known for being extremely challenging. Very tall rough, very quick and undulating greens, as well as extremely long compared to most courses, even the ones they play on tour. The ones coming up, obviously, we have Shinnecock Hills here in 2018, we have Chambers Bay, that was a couple of years back, and coming up on the roster we have courses like Pebble Beach, Torrey Pines, Pinehurst No. 2, and Oakmont. All very difficult tracks, even in regular events, but when they bring the US Open to these courses, they seem to get even tougher. So that also goes to the best performances we've actually seen from the US Opens, even on these tough courses. Tiger Woods takes the most notable one at Pebble Beach in the year 2000 when he actually won by 15 strokes, shooting 12 under and coming far ahead of anybody else. Then we move to Rory McIlroy, who actually shot the course record in relation to par at 16 under in 2011 at Congressional Country Club, which is actually right down the road from us. Then actually in 2017, Brooks Koepka tied Rory's record of 16 under at Erin Hills. This year though, we do have one of the toughest fields we've ever seen in the US Open. It's the strongest field ever. We have more people kind of rotating around that number 1 spot than we've ever had before. We've kind of moved past the days of one player dominating for decades and into the stage where so many people are playing at such a high caliber that it's almost impossible to even pick a handful of people and possibly guess the right winner. Not to mention this year we also have Tiger back and playing in good form coming into the year. And many of the players that have played in the major championships coming up to this point, some of them haven't even played with Tiger. They grew up watching him, but now that he's back, everyone's getting to see someone who's actually used to this pressure and coming back in that spot. Not to mention, with everything that's going on, the world number 1 spot is actually up for grabs, and the US Open can make a huge impact on that. Actually, this week it was actually overtaken, but we still have so many people tied at a couple points away that it could go through anybody at this point. We still have a couple tournaments left, so the standings could change pretty dramatically with a couple good wins and a couple good streaks these guys can get on. But coming up to the US Open, it's going to be one of the toughest competitions and one of the most at-stake ones to date. Not to mention this year, it's a $12 million purse, with the winner taking over just $2 million away from the win. Same prize pool that we had back in 2017. A lot better than the $150 that we saw in 1895. Alright guys, thanks for watching. If you guys like this style of video, please let me know. You can comment on it, tell me whatever, I'm open to any criticisms. This is my first time I'm doing a video of this style, so let me know how it turned out. I know there aren't a lot of photos throughout it, so I appreciate you guys, if you got to this point, sticking through everything. Alright, see ya.